Captain Jake Martinez had seen a lot of weird things in his 15 years hauling cargo across the galaxy, but watching his engineer calculate the exact probability of his cat being completely useless was definitely making the top 10 list. According to my calculations, Vex chittered, her forearms gesticulating wildly as she spoke, your Earth feline has a 97.4% chance of contributing absolutely nothing to this mission except consume resources and produce waste. Jake looked down at Mr. Whiskers, who was currently doing his best impression of a furry paperweight on the bridge's navigation console. The orange tabby had one eye cracked open, apparently judging whether Vex's commentary was worth acknowledging, then decided it wasn't and went back to sleep. Gee, thanks for the pep talk, Vex, Jake said, scratching behind the cat's ears. Really boosting morale here. Grom, the ship's 7-foot-tall reptilian security chief, snorted from his station. At least it's quiet. My cousin's war lizard could tear through hull plating, but it never shut up. Roared all night about its battle honors. Oh! Pip, their eternally enthusiastic avian navigator, practically bounced in her perch. My family's hunting hawks back on Kepler Prime can spot prey from 12 kilometers away. They've got neural implants that link directly to targeting systems and everything. Jake raised an eyebrow. Neural implants? For birds? Well, yeah. Pip's feathers ruffled with pride. How else would they interface with modern combat protocols? Your little, what do you call it, Mr. Whiskers? He doesn't even have basic tactical augmentations. His name's Mr. Whiskers, and he's perfectly fine the way he is, Jake said, though he had to admit the cat did look pretty unimpressive compared to the stories his crew kept telling. Every alien species they'd encountered seemed to have some kind of genetically modified, cybernetically enhanced, or psychically linked companion animal. Meanwhile, Earth had apparently contributed a creature whose greatest achievement was knocking things off tables. Vex pulled up a holographic display showing various alien pets in action. Observe, the Zentaurian battlehounds can leap 40 meters and have retractable plasma claws. The Rigelian thundercats can generate electromagnetic pulses. Even the Andromedan peace doves are equipped with micro-missiles. Peace doves with missiles, Jake repeated slowly. Anyone else see the irony there? The point is, Grom rumbled, every civilized species has evolved their companion animals for specific purposes. Protection, utility, enhancement of their natural abilities. Your species apparently just liked having small predators around that serve no function. Mr. Whiskers chose that moment to stretch, yawn, and then promptly fall off the console. He landed on his feet, of course, looked around as if the whole thing had been intentional, and then padded over to his food bowl. See? Vex's mandibles clicked in what Jake had learned was the insectoid equivalent of laughing. 97.4%. Useless. I should have rounded up to 98. Jake watched his cat crunch through his kibble with the focused intensity of a creature that had never missed a meal in its life. You know what, Vex? Maybe you're right. Maybe Mr. Whiskers isn't a super soldier or a walking weapons platform. Maybe he's just a cat. Exactly, Pip chirped. Finally, you're seeing reason. But, Jake continued with a grin, we're heading to Kepler 442b to deliver mining supplies, not fight a war. So unless you're expecting us to run into something that requires plasma claws and missile-launching birds, I think we'll be fine. Grom's scales shifted to a darker shade, which Jake had learned meant he was thinking. Actually, Captain, there have been some reports from that sector. Nothing confirmed, but... But what? Wild animal attacks on the mining colonies. Probably nothing a few security drones can't handle. Vex's antennae twitched. Define probably nothing. Well, Grom said slowly, the reports mentioned some local predators. Big ones, with poison. Jake looked down at Mr. Whiskers, who had finished eating and was now grooming his paw with the methodical precision of someone who had absolutely no idea that the conversation above him was about deadly alien predators. Poison, huh? Jake said. Good thing we've got all those battle-ready super pets to protect us. There was a moment of awkward silence. Oh, Pip said in a much smaller voice. Right. We don't have any of those. Nope, Jake said cheerfully. Just one completely useless 97.4% worthless Earth cat. He picked up Mr. Whiskers, who purred and rubbed against his chin. But hey, what's the worst that could happen? As if on cue, the ship's comm system crackled to life with an incoming transmission from Kepler 442b. The voice on the other end sounded stressed, tired, and more than a little desperate. This is Colony Administrator Knox to incoming cargo vessel Lucky Strike. We have a situation here. Please confirm you have adequate security measures for planetary landing. We've had some incidents with the local wildlife and we need to brief you on safety protocols before you enter atmosphere. Jake looked at his crew, then down at Mr. Whiskers, who had already fallen asleep in his arms. "Well," he said, "this should be interesting." Colony Administrator Zara Knox looked like she hadn't slept in about 3 weeks, which, as it turned out, wasn't far from the truth. "Fangbeasts," she said without preamble as Jake and his crew gathered in the colony's main administrative dome. 8 feet tall, 12 feet long, pack hunters with neurotoxic venom and the hunting instincts of a nightmare. They showed up 2 months ago and decided our mining operation looked like an all-you-can-eat buffet. She gestured to a holographic display showing grainy security footage of something that looked like someone had crossed a saber-toothed tiger with a Komodo dragon and then given it anger management issues. The creature in the video was casually tearing through a reinforced security fence like it was tissue paper. "Sweet binary code," Vex whispered, her antennae quivering as she ran calculations. "The bite force alone registers at over 4,000 pounds per square inch. That's a 99.7% chance of immediate death upon contact." "Finally," Jake muttered, "something you're willing to round up." Rom studied the footage with professional interest. "How many in the pack?" "We've counted at least 12, possibly more. They're smart too. They've learned our patrol schedules, figured out our weak points, and they seem to enjoy making us look like idiots." Knox rubbed her temples. "Last week one of them somehow triggered our emergency lockdown systems just to watch us panic." Pip's feathers had gone completely flat against her body. That's not normal predator behavior." "Tell me about it," Knox said, "which is why we hired the best." She gestured toward the dome's entrance, where a figure was striding in with the kind of confidence that suggested he'd never met a problem he couldn't solve by shooting it. He was tall, muscular, and wearing enough tactical gear to outfit a small army. Behind him padded something that looked like a cross between a wolf and a buzzsaw, all gleaming metal teeth and glowing red eyes. "Captain Rex Vortan," the newcomer announced, as if his name should mean something to everyone present. "Galactic Pest Control Solutions, first-class certification in xenobiology and tactical elimination. This is Decimator, my personally trained Rigelian razorhound." Decimator looked around the room and growled, a sound like grinding metal that made everyone except Jake take a step back. Rex patted the creature's armored head with obvious pride. "Decimator here has taken down everything from Altarian deathworms to vegan cave bears. These Fangbeasts won't know what hit them." Jake glanced down at Mr. Whiskers, who was investigating a particularly interesting dust bunny in the corner and seemed completely oblivious to the presence of a creature that could probably bite him in half without breaking stride. "Impressive," Jake said. "How much is this costing the colony?" Knox winced. 50,000 credits per day plus ammunition costs and hazard pay." 50,000? Jake blinked. "Per day? You can't put a price on safety," Rex declared, then paused as he noticed Mr. Whiskers for the first time. What is that?" "That's Mr. Whiskers," Jake said. "He's a cat." Rex stared for a long moment, then burst out laughing. "You brought a pet to a Fangbeast hunt? What's it going to do, purr them to death?" "He's not here to hunt anything. He's just here." "Just here," Rex repeated, wiping tears from his eyes. "Oh, that's rich. You hear that, Decimator? The cargo haulers brought a therapy animal to a combat zone." Decimator made a sound that might have been laughter, if laughter could cut through steel plating. "Look, friend," Rex said, putting a condescending hand on Jake's shoulder. "I appreciate you trying to help, but this is serious business. We're talking about apex predators that have been terrorizing this colony for months. You might as well try to stop a plasma cannon with a feather." "Actually," Vex interjected, "a feather would have zero effectiveness against a plasma cannon. The probability of success would be—" "It was a metaphor, Bugbrain," Rex snapped. Jake felt his temper starting to fray. "Look, Captain Vortan, we're just here to deliver supplies. We're not trying to muscle in on your operation." "Good, because you'd be in way over your head. These aren't some domesticated earth critters we're dealing with. These are evolved killers with millions of years of predatory instincts." Rex gestured broadly. "This requires military-grade tactics, advanced weaponry, and purpose-bred combat animals. Not—" he looked down at Mr. Whiskers again and laughed. "Not whatever that is." Mr. Whiskers, having finished his investigation of the dust bunny, sat down and began grooming his paw with the kind of focused attention that suggested the entire conversation was beneath his notice. "See?" Rex said. "Your pet doesn't even have basic threat assessment capabilities. Decimator's already cataloged every potential escape route, identified the strongest opponents in the room, and calculated optimal attack vectors. Your little furball is licking its foot. He's cleaning himself, Jake said. It's a hygiene thing. Right, hygiene, while surrounded by discussions of mortal danger. Rex shook his head. Administrator Knox, I recommend you keep the civilian cargo crew confined to the secure areas while my team handles the real work. Wouldn't want anyone getting hurt because they thought their house pet could contribute to a professional operation. Knox looked between Jake and Rex uncomfortably. Captain Martinez, Captain Vortan does have extensive experience with this sort of thing. I'm sure he does, Jake said, and we'll stay out of your way. Just point us toward the landing pad when you're ready for us to unload the supplies. Excellent, Rex said. Try not to let your cat wander off. These Fangbeasts can smell weakness from kilometers away, and frankly, that thing looks like it's never had a challenging day in its life. As if summoned by the comment, an alarm began blaring throughout the dome. Knox rushed to her console, her face going pale as she read the display. Motion sensors are picking up movement near the eastern perimeter. Multiple contacts, large, moving in coordinated patterns. Rex's expression shifted to professional focus. How many? At least 6, possibly more. They're not trying to hide this time. Rex grinned, showing too many teeth. Perfect. Time for a demonstration of how real hunters work. Come on, Decimator. Let's show these colonists what 50,000 credits a day gets them. As Rex and his metal-toothed companion strode out toward the perimeter, Jake looked down at Mr. Whiskers, who had finished grooming and was now staring at the dome's exit with the kind of intense focus that usually meant he'd spotted something interesting. What do you think, buddy? Jake asked quietly. Think our new friend knows what he's doing? Mr. Whiskers flicked his tail once and went back to staring at the door. Jake had the distinct feeling his cat had just delivered an opinion on Rex Vortan's professional capabilities, and it wasn't particularly flattering. 2 hours later, Jake was beginning to think that 50,000 credits per day might have been overpriced. The first sign of trouble came when Rex's voice crackled over the comm system, and instead of his usual confident swagger, there was a distinct note of what Jake generously decided to call tactical reassessment. Command, this is Vortan. We've made contact with the hostile pack. Decimator is repositioning for a better angle of attack. Knox leaned into her microphone. Repositioning? What does that mean? There was a pause, followed by what sounded like something large crashing through underbrush, and then Rex's voice again, slightly more breathless. It means my combat-trained Razorhound is currently demonstrating the better part of valor by running away very, very fast. Running away? Knox's voice went up an octave. Your 50,000 credit per day solution is running away? It's called strategic withdrawal, Rex snapped over the comm. These Fangbeasts they're not behaving according to standard Predator protocols. They set up an ambush, an actual ambush with coordinated flanking maneuvers and diversionary tactics. Vex's antennae twitched as she processed this information. The probability of pack hunters developing advanced tactical planning without tool use is less than 12%. Tell that to the Fangbeasts, Rex's voice replied, punctuated by more crashing sounds. They've got Decimator cornered in a ravine, and every time he tries to charge, they fall back and let him waste energy on empty air. It's like they know exactly what he's going to do before he does it. Jake looked down at Mr. Whiskers, who was sitting by the window, watching the distant commotion with the kind of detached interest usually reserved for watching fish in an aquarium. The cat's tail was twitching slightly, which Jake had learned meant he was either annoyed or calculating something. The comm crackled again. Command, we need backup. Sending coordinates for additional mercenary units. These things are too smart for a single hunter team. Additional units? Knox's voice was getting shrill. Do you have any idea what this is costing us already? Administrator, with all due respect, you can't put a price on safety. You literally did. Yesterday, 50,000 credits. While Knox argued with Rex over the comm, Jake found himself studying the tactical display showing the Fangbeast's movements. There was something familiar about their pattern, something that reminded him of... Ah, he said quietly. What? Grom asked, looking over from his security station. It's probably nothing, but back on Earth when farmers had problems with coyotes getting into their chicken coops, they didn't usually send in attack dogs. Pip's head cocked to one side. What did they send? Cats. Big ones usually, but sometimes just regular house cats. Coyotes are pack hunters, but they're also opportunists. They don't like fair fights, and they really don't like dealing with something small and unpredictable that might scratch their eyes out. Vex calculated rapidly. But the size differential between a Fangbeast and a domestic feline is approximately 40 to 1. The combat effectiveness ratio would be... 0, Jake finished. Yeah, I know, it was just a thought. The comm system erupted with static, and Rex's increasingly frantic voice. They've got thermal camouflage. How do they have thermal camouflage? They're biological entities. Maybe they're just naturally cold-blooded, Jake suggested into his headset. Who is this? Get off the tactical channel. This is a professional operation. It's Captain Martinez from the cargo ship. I was just thinking that if they're cold-blooded, they probably don't see heat signatures the way mammals do. They might be tracking by smell or vibration instead. There was a pause. Tracking by? What kind of backwater planet logic is that? Earth logic, I guess. When you can't outmuscle something, you try to outthink it. Rex's voice turned condescending even in the middle of his apparent tactical disaster. Look, cargo hauler, I appreciate the folk wisdom, but this is a combat situation, requiring professional expertise. These creatures have been terrorizing this colony for months. You can't just wander out there with your pet cat and expect to solve problems that require military-grade solutions. I wasn't suggesting... What's next? Going to tell me to leave out a saucer of milk? Maybe some catnip? Rex's laugh was harsh. Decimator has been trained by the finest combat specialists in 3 systems. He's worth more than your entire cargo run. If he can't handle these things, what makes you think some primitive Earth tactics would work? The comm went quiet for a moment. Then Rex's voice came back, much more subdued. Command, we're falling back to secondary positions. These things they're hurting us. Actually hurting us away from the colony. Knox looked pale. Hurting you toward what? I don't know, but I don't want to find out. Decimator's showing stress indicators I've never seen before. His combat programming is telling him to engage, but his survival instincts are screaming at him to run. Jake glanced down at Mr. Whiskers, who had turned away from the window and was now staring directly at him with that peculiar intensity cats got when they were trying to communicate something important to their humans. What is it, buddy? Jake asked quietly. Mr. Whiskers walked over to the door leading to the outer corridors, sat down, and meowed once. It wasn't his usual demanding yowl for food or attention. It was quieter, more focused. Almost like he was asking a question. He wants to go outside, Jake said, mostly to himself. Rom snorted. Probably just needs to use a waste facility. But Jake had lived with Mr. Whiskers for 3 years, and he'd learned to read the cat's moods. This wasn't about bathroom breaks. This was the same look Mr. Whiskers got when he'd spotted a mouse in the cargo hold, or when he'd somehow figured out that Jake was about to open a can of his favorite food. It was the look of a predator who'd found something interesting. Over the comm, Rex was still calling for backup, still complaining about the Fangbeast's unorthodox tactics and non-standard behavior patterns. His 50,000 credit per day solution was turning into an expensive retreat, and everyone in the command center was starting to look worried. Everyone except Mr. Whiskers, who had moved to sit directly in front of the door and was now staring at it with the kind of patient focus that suggested he was prepared to wait there all day if necessary. Jake looked at his cat, then at the tactical display showing Rex's continued retreat, then back at his cat. This is probably a terrible idea, he said to no one in particular. Mr. Whiskers flicked his tail and continued staring at the door, as if to say that terrible ideas were sometimes the only ideas worth having. Night on Kepler 442b fell like a curtain made of purple velvet and bad decisions. The colony had locked down tight after Rex's expensive demonstration of how not to hunt Fangbeasts, and everyone was huddled in the main compound trying to pretend they weren't listening for the sound of claws on metal. Well, almost everyone. Jake sat in the temporary quarters they'd been assigned, watching Mr. Whiskers pace back and forth in front of the sealed door with the kind of restless energy the cat usually reserved for 3 a.m. zoomies. The tabby would walk to the door, sit down, stare at it intensely for 30 seconds, then get up and repeat the process. You know we can't go out there, right? Jake said, scratching behind his own ears in a gesture of pure exhaustion. Those things out there could use you as a toothpick. Mr. Whiskers paused in his pacing to give Jake a look that clearly conveyed his opinion of human intelligence, then went back to staring at the door. Meanwhile, in the colony's main recreation area, Rex was holding court with a drink that was probably stronger than ship fuel, and definitely more expensive. His audience consisted of Vex, Grom, and Pip, along with a handful of colonists who looked like they were reconsidering their career choices. The problem, Rex declared, gesturing broadly with his glass, is that these colonists expected a quick solution to a complex problem. You can't just waltz into an ecosystem and expect to dominate it overnight. These Fangbeasts have had millions of years to perfect their hunting techniques. But your promotional materials said you specialized in rapid xenobiological threat elimination, one of the colonists pointed out. Rex waved dismissively. Marketing copy. The reality is that truly dangerous predators require sustained engagement protocols, extended tactical analysis, multi-phase elimination strategies. This could take weeks. Vex's mandibles clicked as she calculated. Weeks, at 50,000 credits per day, equals... A significant investment in colony safety, Rex interrupted smoothly. You can't put a price on peace of mind. Actually, Grom rumbled, I'm pretty sure you put exactly that price on it yesterday. Rex's jaw tightened. Look, Scaleface, I don't see your security protocols keeping these things out of the compound. At least my team made contact with the hostiles. Your team ran away, Pitt chirped helpfully. Strategic withdrawal, Rex corrected through gritted teeth. Decimator was gathering intelligence on enemy capabilities, standard reconnaissance protocols. While Rex continued to explain why his failure was actually a sophisticated tactical maneuver, 3 corridors away, Mr. Whiskers had apparently reached the end of his patience with human security measures. Jake was reviewing cargo manifests when he heard the soft scritch-scratch of claws on metal, followed by the distinctive sound of ventilation grating being displaced. He looked up just in time to see an orange tail disappearing into an air duct that looked barely wide enough for a sandwich, let alone a cat. Oh, come on, Jake muttered, rushing to the vent. Mr. Whiskers, get back here. This is not the time for exploration. But the cat was already gone, and the only response was the faint echo of paws padding through the colony's ventilation system. Mr. Whiskers, for his part, was having the time of his life. The air ducts were clean, spacious, by cat standards, and provided an excellent highway system throughout the entire colony. More importantly, they carried scents. To human noses, the colony probably smelled like recycled air, industrial lubricants, and whatever the cafeteria had served for dinner. To a cat's nose, it was a complex symphony of information. He could smell the fierce sweat of the colonists, the metallic tang of Rex's augmented companion, the various alien scents of Jake's crewmates, and underneath it all, something else. Something wild. Something that didn't belong in enclosed spaces and filtered air. Something that smelled like blood and earth, and the kind of confidence that came from never having met an effective predator. Mr. Whiskers followed the scent trail through the ventilation system, his paws silent on the metal surfaces. Cats had been perfecting the art of silent movement for thousands of years before humans figured out space travel, and the skills translated beautifully to alien architecture. The scent grew stronger as he moved away from the colony's central areas, leading him through a maze of ducts that eventually opened onto external vents near the mining operations. Here, the smells of the outside world mixed with the industrial odors of human habitation, creating a complex bouquet that told him everything he needed to know. The Fangbeasts weren't just randomly attacking the colony. They had a base of operations, somewhere close enough to monitor human activity but far enough away to avoid detection. The scent trail led away from the colony in a straight line, toward a cluster of rock formations that the mining surveys had marked as geologically uninteresting. Which, from a predator's perspective, made them perfect. Mr. Whiskers emerged from the ventilation system through an external grate that some careless engineer had failed to secure properly. The night air hit him like a wall of alien sensations. Different gravity, different atmospheric pressure, different constellations overhead. But underneath all the foreignness, the fundamentals were the same. He was a small predator in a large world, and he had work to do. The scent trail led across open ground that would have been suicide for any human to cross, but Mr. Whiskers had advantages that no human could replicate. He was small enough to use terrain features that larger creatures would ignore. He was naturally quiet, with paws designed for stealth. Most importantly, he had infinite patience. Where Rex's approach had been all noise and flash and expensive technology, Mr. Whiskers simply became part of the landscape and waited. And while he waited, following the scent trail deeper into the rock formations, he began to notice other smells, chemical smells, synthetic lubricants and industrial solvents that had no business being this far from the mining equipment. Somewhere ahead, in what his nose told him was the heart of the Fangbeast territory, something was very wrong. Back at the colony, Jake was trying to explain to a very unsympathetic Knox why his cat's midnight adventure wasn't actually a violation of quarantine protocols. Your animal is loose in a hostile environment, Knox said, her stress levels clearly maxing out. Do you have any idea what this could do to our insurance premiums? He's not loose, Jake protested. He's just exploring. He'll come back when he gets hungry. What if he doesn't come back because he gets eaten by something with 8-inch fangs? Jake considered this. Then I guess Rex was right about him being useless. Knox stared at him. That's your response? Your pet might become a midnight snack for alien predators and you're making jokes? Look, Administrator. Mr. Whiskers has survived 3 years on cargo ships, 2 encounters with space pirates, and 1 memorable incident involving a malfunctioning food processor that tried to eat him. If he can handle all that, I think he can manage 1 night on an alien planet. What Jake didn't mention, because he wasn't entirely sure he believed it himself, was that Mr. Whiskers had never shown this kind of focused determination about anything except food. The cat's behavior tonight felt different, purposeful. Almost like he had a plan, which was ridiculous, because cats didn't make plans. Cats reacted to situations with a combination of instinct and attitude, usually in ways that maximize their own comfort and convenience. But as Jake stared out the window at the alien landscape where his cat had disappeared, he couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Whiskers had seen something the rest of them had missed. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the colony's lights, a small orange tabby was about to prove that millions of years of evolutionary fine-tuning could be more effective than all the military-grade technology in the galaxy. Dawn on Kepler 442b came with all the subtlety of a plasma cannon blast, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if everyone hadn't been too terrified to appreciate them. Jake had spent most of the night alternating between staring out the window and pacing around their quarters, occasionally calling for Mr. Whiskers in the increasingly futile hope that his cat would just waltz back through the door like nothing had happened. Instead, the first sign that something had changed came from Knox's panicked voice over the colony-wide comm system. All personnel to emergency stations, we have a Code 7 situation in Sector 12. Repeat, Code 7 in Sector 12. Jake was still trying to remember what Code 7 meant when Vex burst through his door, all 4 arms gesticulating wildly and her antennae practically vibrating with excitement. Captain Martinez, you need to come to the command center immediately. There has been a significant development in the Fangbeast situation. Did they attack the colony? Jake asked, his stomach dropping. Is anyone hurt? No, that is not the issue. The issue is much more unprecedented. Jake followed Vex through corridors filled with colonists who looked like they'd been woken up by emergency alarms and weren't entirely sure whether they should be running towards something or away from it. The command center was buzzing with activity, with Knox barking orders at technicians while Rex stood off to one side looking like someone had just explained that his expensive combat training had been replaced by a correspondence course. Martinez! Knox called out as soon as she saw him. Your cat! Where is your cat? I don't know. He got out last night. Why? What's happened? Instead of answering, Knox gestured toward the main display screen, which was showing aerial footage from one of their survey drones. The image was focused on a rocky outcropping about 2 kilometers from the colony, and even from the drone's altitude, Jake could see something large and dark sprawled among the boulders. At approximately 0600 hours, Knox said in the voice of someone who had given up trying to make sense of her life, our perimeter sensors detected no Fangbeast activity for the first time in 2 months. None. Complete radio silence. That's good news, right? Jake asked, though the expressions around him suggested otherwise. We sent a drone to investigate their last known position, Knox continued. What we found was, well, see for yourself. The drone's camera zoomed in on the dark shape among the rocks, and Jake felt his breath catch. It was definitely a Fangbeast, and it was definitely dead. The creature was massive, easily 12 feet from nose to tail, with fangs that looked like they could pierce through armor plating. But what made Jake's stomach lurch wasn't the size of the thing. It was the small orange shape sitting calmly beside the corpse, grooming his paw with the satisfied air of someone who had just completed a particularly challenging but successful project. Is that, Jake started. Your 97.4% useless Earth feline, Vex finished, her voice filled with what Jake could only describe as mathematical bewilderment, sitting next to what appears to be the Fangbeast Pack Alpha. Rex pushed forward, his face red with indignation. That's impossible. There's no way that tiny creature could take down something that size. Decimator couldn't even get close to one of these things, and he's been combat trained by military specialists. The evidence suggests otherwise, Grom rumbled, studying the footage with professional interest, though I admit the logistics are confusing. Knox was frantically typing commands into her console. I'm pulling up the security footage from last night. If we can figure out how this happened. The screen split, showing both the current drone footage and grainy night vision recordings from the colony's external cameras. Jake watched in fascination as the timeline played out. Mr. Whiskers disappearing into the ventilation system, emerging outside the colony perimeter, and then vanishing into the darkness beyond camera range. "There," Knox said, pausing the footage. "Timestamp shows your cat left the colony at 23:47 hours. The next relevant footage is from the mining site cameras." She switched to a different feed, this one showing the automated mining equipment that operated through the night. For several hours, nothing happened, except the steady movement of excavation machinery. Then, at approximately 0200 hours, a small shape appeared at the edge of the frame. "Enhanced magnification," Knox commanded, and the image zoomed in to show Mr. Whiskers padding carefully between massive pieces of mining equipment, his nose to the ground like he was following a trail. "What's he doing?" Pip asked, her feathers ruffled with confusion. Jake studied his cat's behavior on the screen. "Hunting. He's following a scent trail." The footage showed Mr. Whiskers spending nearly an hour exploring the mining site, paying particular attention to areas where lubricants and coolants had leaked from the machinery. At one point he found a puddle of something that glowed faintly under the night vision cameras and spent several minutes investigating it thoroughly. "Industrial solvent," one of Knox's technicians reported, checking the maintenance logs. "High toxicity synthetic compound used in the ore processing equipment. There was a minor leak in Sector 7 last week." "Minor leak?" Rex scoffed. "What does that have to do with anything? That creature couldn't possibly have used industrial chemicals to poison a Fangbeast. It doesn't have opposable thumbs." But Jake was beginning to understand, and the realization was making him feel simultaneously proud of his cat and slightly horrified by the implications. "He didn't use the chemicals, he followed them." "What do you mean?" Knox asked. "The Fangbeasts have been raiding your mining operations, right? Taking equipment, disrupting operations? What if they weren't just being destructive? What if they were actually consuming the industrial lubricants?" Vex's antennae twitched as she processed this. Many alien species have metabolisms that can process compounds toxic to others. The probability that Fangbeasts might consume synthetic chemicals for nutritional purposes is approximately 37%. "But if they're not adapted to those specific compounds," Grom said slowly. "Then they'd get sick," Jake finished. "And a sick alpha predator would retreat to somewhere safe to recover, somewhere like a den in those rock formations." The security footage continued, showing Mr. Whiskers leaving the mining site and disappearing again into the darkness. Hours passed with no activity, and then the morning drone footage picked up the story. One dead Fangbeast alpha, and one very satisfied house cat. "So you're telling me," Rex said, his voice getting dangerously quiet, "that your pet cat succeeded where my professionally trained combat animal failed by following his nose to a sick Fangbeast and finishing it off?" "That's exactly what I'm telling you," Jake said, "and honestly, I'm as surprised as you are." Knox was studying the drone footage with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle that had been bothering her for months. "Wait, enhance Sector 4 of the Alpha's den site." The image zoomed in on the area around the dead Fangbeast, revealing something that made everyone in the command center go very quiet. Scattered around the den were the remains of mining equipment that had gone missing over the past 2 months. Drill bits, hydraulic fluid containers, and, most tellingly, several empty lubricant reservoirs that showed clear signs of having been chewed open. "They've been self-medicating," Knox breathed. "The Fangbeasts have been consuming our industrial chemicals because they contain trace minerals they need, but the synthetic compounds were slowly poisoning them. And the Alpha, being the largest and most dominant, would have consumed the most," Vex calculated rapidly, "leading to the highest concentration of toxins in its system." Jake looked at the footage of Mr. Whiskers, who had apparently grown bored with grooming and was now investigating something else among the rocks. "So, when Mr. Whiskers tracked the scent to their den, he found an alpha that was already dying from chemical poisoning. And delivered the coup de grace," Grom said with what might have been respect. "Efficient, practical, no wasted energy on unnecessary combat." Rex stared at the screen for a long moment, his jaw working like he was trying to process information that his brain refused to accept. "This is ridiculous. You're telling me that months of terror, hundreds of thousands of credits in security measures, and the expertise of the finest combat specialists in 3 systems were defeated by a house cat who got lucky?" "Not lucky," Jake said, watching Mr. Whiskers discover what appeared to be a particularly interesting rock. "Smart. He did what cats have been doing for thousands of years. He followed his nose, used his natural stealth abilities, and waited for the right moment to strike. No fancy technology, no expensive training programs. just millions of years of evolutionary optimization. The comm system crackled to life with reports from the perimeter stations. No Fangbeast activity detected, no movement in the surrounding areas, and for the first time in 2 months, mining operations could resume without armed escorts. Rex looked around the command center at the faces of people who were beginning to realize that their very expensive problem had been solved by a creature that cost less to feed per year than his combat animal cost per day. "This is," Rex started, then stopped, apparently unable to find words that adequately expressed his professional humiliation. "This is a cat being a cat," Jake said simply, "and sometimes that's exactly what the situation calls for." On the screen, Mr. Whiskers had apparently decided that his work was done. He stood up, stretched in that leisurely way cats had perfected, and began padding back toward the colony with the unhurried confidence of someone who knew exactly where his next meal was coming from. Jake couldn't help but grin. "I should probably go meet him at the door. He's going to want his breakfast, and after a night like that, I think he's earned the good stuff." 3 hours later, the colony's main recreational area had been transformed into something that looked suspiciously like a victory celebration, complete with decorations, hastily prepared food, and the kind of relieved laughter that only came from people who had just realized they weren't going to die horribly after all. At the center of it all, Mr. Whiskers sat on what could only be described as a throne made from mining equipment cushions, wearing a collar that someone had fashioned from spare optical fiber that made him glow softly in the dim lighting. He was currently working his way through a plate of what the colony's chef had proudly announced was genuine Terran-style tuna, though Jake suspected it was actually some kind of local fish that had been processed to approximate the taste. Not that Mr. Whiskers seemed to mind. He was purring loud enough to be heard over the conversation, occasionally pausing in his feast to accept chin scratches from colonists who had spent the last 2 months convinced they were all going to become Fangbeast snacks. "I have recalculated my initial assessment," Vex announced, approaching Jake with what he had learned to recognize as her version of an apology. "Your Earth feline's usefulness rating has been upgraded from 3.6% to, well, considerably higher." "How much higher?" Jake asked, scratching behind Mr. Whiskers' ears. Vex's antennae twitched with embarrassment. "Current data suggests a usefulness rating of approximately 112%. How do you get more than 100% useful?" "By solving a problem that was costing the colony 50,000 credits per day, while consuming resources worth less than 5 credits per day," Vex explained. "The mathematical efficiency is unprecedented." Nearby, Grom was regaling a group of fascinated colonists with what he claimed was his expert analysis of Mr. Whiskers' tactical approach. "See, what your cat did was pure special operations methodology. Reconnaissance, target assessment, patience, and striking at the moment of maximum vulnerability. Textbook predator behavior." "Yesterday you said he was useless," Pip pointed out. Grom's scales shifted to a slightly embarrassed shade of green. "Yesterday I failed to account for species-specific evolutionary advantages. Earth predators have clearly developed different optimization strategies than our combat animals." "You mean he's sneaky and patient instead of big and obvious," Jake translated. "I prefer tactically sophisticated," Grom replied with dignity. Across the room, Administrator Knox was having what appeared to be a very different conversation with Rex Vortan. Jake couldn't hear the details, but Rex's body language suggested it involved terms like contract termination and full refund, while Knox's expression suggested she was enjoying every minute of it. "The thing I don't understand," said one of the younger colonists, a mining technician who looked like she hadn't slept properly in months, "is how we missed the connection between the equipment theft and the poisoning. We had all the data." Jake considered this while watching Mr. Whiskers investigate a new offering of what might have been alien salmon. "You had the data, but you were looking at it like humans. You saw equipment theft as vandalism or territorial behavior. Mr. Whiskers looked at it like a cat, which meant he was interested in what they were actually doing with the stuff they stole." "But how did he know they were poisoned?" another colonist asked. "He probably didn't, at least not consciously. But cats are really good at reading the health status of other animals. Sick prey smells different, moves different, acts different. When he found that alpha's den, he would have immediately recognized that something was wrong with it." Vex nodded thoughtfully. "A dying apex predator would represent minimal risk and maximum opportunity for a smaller predator. Optimal cost-benefit ratio for engagement. Or as we say on Earth," Jake added, "he saw easy pickings and went for it." The celebration was interrupted by Rex's voice, raised loud enough to carry across the entire room. This is completely unacceptable. My reputation, my professional standing, my entire career is built on providing superior solutions to complex xenobiological threats. Knox's reply was loud enough for everyone to hear. Captain Vorton, your superior solution involved running away from the problem while racking up charges that would have bankrupted this colony within a month. Meanwhile, a house cat solved the entire situation in one night for the cost of a can of tuna. It was luck, Rex protested. Pure dumb luck. That creature stumbled onto a sick animal and finished it off. Maybe, Jake said, standing up and walking over to where Rex was making his scene. But you know what they say about luck. Rex turned to glare at him. What do they say about luck? Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Mr. Whiskers has been preparing to hunt things his entire life. Every day he spends stalking dust motes and pouncing on shadows is practice. Every time he sits motionless for an hour, watching a bug crawl across the floor, he's learning patience. Every successful hunt, even if it's just catching a toy mouse, reinforces those instincts. Jake gestured toward his cat, who was now being fed treats by a steady stream of grateful colonists. You brought a weapon to a problem that needed a hunter. There's a difference. Rex's face was turning an interesting shade of red. That thing is not a hunter. It's a pampered pet that got lucky. As if summoned by the comment, Mr. Whiskers looked up from his tribute feast and fixed Rex with the kind of stare that cats usually reserved for particularly stupid birds. It was a look that somehow managed to convey both infinite patience and absolute certainty that Rex was, in fact, an idiot. Then Mr. Whiskers yawned, showing off fangs that were tiny by Fangbeast standards but were still designed by millions of years of evolution to be very effective at what they did, and went back to accepting offerings from his new admirers. You know what I think happened here? Jake continued, warming to his theme. I think you got so focused on the idea that bigger and more expensive meant better that you forgot the most important rule of problem solving. Which is? Rex asked through gritted teeth. Match the solution to the problem. You brought a sledgehammer to a situation that needed a scalpel. Mr. Whiskers brought exactly what was needed: patience, stealth, and the ability to recognize an opportunity when he saw one. Knox stepped forward, apparently deciding that Rex had been humiliated enough for one day. Captain Vortan, I think it's time you collected your equipment and prepared for departure. Your services are no longer required. Rex looked around the room at the faces of people who were no longer impressed by his credentials or his expensive combat animal. This isn't over. When word gets out that Galactic Pest Control Solutions was replaced by a house cat, it'll ruin everything I've built. Maybe, Jake said. Or maybe it'll teach people that sometimes the best solutions are the simplest ones. Either way, I don't think that's our problem. Rex stormed out, followed by his dejected Razorhound, who looked like he was reconsidering his career choices. The door sealed behind them with a finality that seemed to lift the mood in the room even higher. So, Knox said, turning to Jake with a smile, I suppose this means your cargo delivery mission was a complete success. Jake looked over at Mr. Whiskers, who had apparently decided he'd had enough tribute for the moment and was now engaged in the serious business of grooming his paw. I don't know about that. We still haven't unloaded the mining supplies. After what your cat did for this colony, I think we can waive the standard unloading fees, Knox replied. Consider it a professional courtesy. Hear that, Mr. Whiskers? Jake called over to his cat. You just earned us a free cargo handling. Mr. Whiskers looked up briefly, flicked his tail in what might have been acknowledgement, and returned to his grooming, with the air of someone who had always known he was worth considerably more than standard freight rates. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down and the colonists began returning to their normal routines for the first time in months, Jake found himself sitting in the observation lounge with his crew, watching the alien sunset paint the sky in colors that Earth had never seen. I have to admit, Vex said thoughtfully, this experience has significantly altered my understanding of Earth's species optimization strategies. How so? Jake asked. I had assumed that any species capable of space travel would have developed their companions along military or utilitarian lines. The concept of maintaining a relationship with a creature based purely on, what is the human term, companionship, it seemed inefficient. And now? Vex's mandibles clicked in what Jake had learned was her version of laughter. Now, I suspect that the human approach may be more sophisticated than we initially calculated. A companion selected for emotional compatibility, rather than specific function, may actually be more adaptable to unexpected situations. Plus, Grom added, your species apparently has excellent instincts for recognizing effective predators, even if you disguise them as pets. Jake looked down at Mr. Whiskers, who was curled up in his lap, purring like a small furry engine. I don't think we disguised anything. I think we just recognized that sometimes the most effective predator is the one that doesn't look dangerous until it's too late, Pip said thoughtfully. Is a terrifying philosophy when you think about it. Only if you're prey, Jake replied with a grin. As if to punctuate the point, Mr. Whiskers opened one eye, assessed the situation, decided everything was satisfactory, and went back to sleep, with the profound contentment of a creature who had proven his worth to the universe, and was now ready to collect his reward in the form of endless chin scratches and premium space tuna. Outside the observation windows, the lights of the mining colony twinkled peacefully in the alien night, free of Fangbeast attacks for the first time in months, all thanks to one small Earth cat, who had done exactly what millions of years of evolution had designed him to do.